and the light comes on. Okay. There's a tiny bit of a delay, so when you want to talk, push and wait just a second before you talk.
Hello, Bliss. Can you hear us?
I did just then.
She did. I couldn't. I heard something. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope everybody had wonderful holidays. I'm officially calling the meeting to order, and could we please take the roll?
Melissa Lammers. Jessica Gao. Here. Wendy Anderson. Tyler sent his regrets. Sarah Lee Morrissey. Bob Fitzsimmons. John Hoblick. Jack Surratt. Bliss Jameson.
Here.
Bliss is online, and so once we know we have a physical quorum, we'll ask that you vote to allow her to participate online. Bill Lights, Bernie LaFease, Alex Zielinski, Suzanne Schreiber, and we have a brand new member, Donna Brosmer. Welcome. So if you would entertain allowing Bliss to participate remotely, that would be the time to do that.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? The motion is made by Bill Lights and seconded by Sarah Lee Morrissey. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. And hi, Bliss. You get to participate from online. Good to
Hello, thank you.
have you here. You're welcome. And before we get into our business, I would like to welcome our new member, Donna. How do you say your last name? Brosmer? Brosmer. Thank you. We'd like to welcome Donna, who we have waited for a very, very, very long time. So we're glad that you're here. I think this is the day of the most number of absences we've ever had thus far. Yes, I'm going to get a ticket. So they're all full. They're all full. This is a very collegial group of people. We don't agree on everything, and that's the point in great part, but we work very well together. So I think you'll enjoy being among us. And it might be good to take just a couple minutes for the folks in the room and you to introduce ourselves. Okay? Would you like to kick off, Donna? Tell us about you.
Oh, there it is. Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Donna Brosmer. I spent most of my professional life in Palm Beach County. I was there for about 40 years, and during that time, I served on a variety of advisory committees, including the one that updated the comp plan. In my professional work, I did major annexations and other land use related things for local governments. And at one point, I had made the comment at orientation that I'm kind of in the middle on the issues that you all tackle, because I was a water lobbyist most recently in Colorado for 9 years. But in Colorado, water is a property right. So I was a property rights person, and I am. But I also was, in my early activist days, the defendant in a SLAPP suit filed for $2 million filed by a developer who was unhappy with me. So I've been on both sides of these issues, and I also owned a landscape nursery for 10 years. So I'm a little bit all over the place in terms of having some ag background and a lot of public policy background. I worked in public policy for 30 years. And so I hope some of that will be useful here. And thank you.
Wendy, would you like to finish up that flank and then we'll start around this way with Jack after you?
Sure. I'm Wendy Anderson. I'm a professor of environmental science at Stetson and also a member of the Board of Supervisors for this Volusia Soil and Water Conservation District. And I like to consider myself in the middle too, but also kind of all over the place. Maybe not everybody in the room would agree. But anyway, I like to think I'm bringing an academic perspective to our conversations and also, with some experience working alongside developers to help them kind of get up to speed on low impact development and other kinds of strategies for smarter planning.
Thank you, Wendy. Jack?
Good. Okay, well, yes, I'm Jack Surrett and I'm a business consultant by trade. And my background here is weaker than most of the other folks, including yours. But I did have the honor of being a member of ECHO on that board for 5 years and also the Growth Management Commission. And so I've got an active interest in environmental causes and how it fits with growth and development within Volusia County.
And I'm John Hoblick. I live in DeLeon Springs, Florida. I have a nursery farm operation up there, cut foliage, represent more of an agricultural perspective along with being a part-time farmer. I was a full-time president of the Florida Farm Bureau Federation for 15 years. And we had at that time about 150,000 members representing agriculture across the state. So I come from a background of policy as well, understanding not only what happens here in Volusia County, but across the state and how it all ties together. And appreciate the opportunity to serve on this committee.
Suzanne, do you feel comfortable? You just walked in. We're introducing ourselves to our new member, Donna Brusmer. Thank you, Sarah Lee.
Hi, welcome. Sarah Lee Morrissey. I am a professional urban planner. Came here long enough ago that I'm not going to say how many decades it was, but did city planning for one of our local municipalities for a number of years, and then moved over to the school district where I spent the bulk of my professional career being the planner for the school district and acted as a developer because we were in the midst of building a lot of schools. So have a little bit of both sides of the equation when it comes to development, except that my development experience is primarily public sector. And I now do consulting in the K-12 school planning field, and I am a board member of the League of Women Voters, which takes an active interest in many of the policy issues facing all of us.
Bill?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Bill Lights. I'm an ecologist by trade. I grew up in Titusville, been here all my life in Florida. I'm an environmental consultant, work for a small engineering, planning, and landscape architect firm.
And we do permitting for all sorts of development, change, comp plans and do environmental permitting like ERPs with the Water Management District and DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. Back 20 years ago, I was working for a really good planning firm, and we helped develop the Florida Green Building Coalition development certification program. So I'm very interested in good growth, and on this board to help keep things simple and not kind of watch for additional restrictions and regulations that make things difficult to develop.
Thank you, Bill. I'm Melissa Lammers. I've been in Volusia County starting in 1965. I'm not afraid to say I'm old. And I grew up on and live on the North Peninsula in Ormond by the Sea, which is an unincorporated area of the county at its northernmost extreme. Professionally, I'm marketing communications executive, traveled the world with that, lived some interesting places, and chose to come and devote time to my other great passion, which is the intersection between science and public policy for the benefit of the environment. And that's why I'm here, and it's a great privilege to serve.
Okay, last one. I'm Jessica Gall. I'm a land use and environmental attorney here in the county. Started in law school from a public policy background, so worked with Earth Justice, Surfrider Foundation, Save the Manatee Club, all those fun groups, and then came over to the private development side for practice. And so try to bring some of those lessons with us to kind of find balance and smart growth for the community.
Thank you, Jessica. And with that, Bliss, do you want to tell us about yourself? Sorry.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bliss Jamison. I am the president of the Southeast Volusia Manufacturing and Technology Coalition. We promote Volusia County, specifically Southeast Volusia, as a great place to live and work and do business. I also am a realtor. That is my revenue source, specializing in airport residential and commercial properties and vacant land use. So I deal with a lot of developers and farmers.
Thank you, Bliss. And with that, we can go on to our first agenda item, which is the selection of chair and vice chair for the coming year. I open the floor to nominations. Sarah Lee?
I guess I have a question. My question is, Melissa and Jessica, are you willing to continue to serve in the roles that you are in? Then I'm going to make a motion. And that motion is,
It's the way to do.
my motion is to have Melissa Lammers continue as chair and Jessica Gall continue as our vice chair.
Any additional nominations or discussion? That's out in the hallway, right? I'm hearing voices that may disqualify me. In that case, all those in favor of accepting the slate of Melissa Lammers and Jessica Gao, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion? Thank you very much. And with that, we will continue moving right along through our agenda with the approval of the December 6th minutes. And that was a very action-packed and pithy meeting. Has everyone had the opportunity to read those minutes? All right, I will entertain a motion for their approval or amendment. Bill Lights moves to approve the minutes of December 6th. Any seconds? Sarah Lee,
I have an amendment to ask about anyway. And unless we're cutting our meeting short, and I don't think we are, there was a correction on page 4 where it said the meetings would last between 1 to 3, and I think it should have been 1 to 4.
good attention to detail, Mr. Surratt. Thank you so much. Would you like to amend your motion to accept the amended minutes? Bill Lights amends his motion to reflect a change in meeting time from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. rather than 3 p.m., which is in the current minutes. The minutes will be amended. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jack Surratt. All those in favor of approving the amended minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes of December 6, 2023 are approved. Thank you. So two of our two deliverables to the county council as reports are the annual report for the year that has just passed. And Ginger's going to talk to us, in addition to reviewing that report and approving it, Ginger's going to talk to us about the council agenda item. And it's actually my understanding, my reading, that we also have to submit our work plan for 2024, which we did create in our last meeting. So as everyone had an opportunity to review, we reviewed the annual report in the last meeting and made a few little corrections to it. Does anyone have an additional correction? I have just one.
Okay.
The addition of Ms. Brosmer, of Donna, to the list, unless she shouldn't be.
I don't think so because she was appointed in 2024.
Okay, thank you. All righty. Any other changes to our wonderfully drafted by Ms. Morrissey annual report? Do we need to move on this? Okay, thank you so much. And thank you again for working on that, Sarah Lee. Since it will be part of the council agenda item, shall we also discuss the work plan? Did everyone have an opportunity to review that? That came out yesterday. Sarah Lee, you have a comment? Well,
I did review it and I agree it's what we discussed. But I do have a question because I'm not crazy about how I voted, but I'm willing to stick with it. I just have a question. Our priorities 4 and 5, which updates revisions to the Indian River Lagoon overlay standards, and then standards to address adaptation to sea level rise and promote resilience. In terms of the priority that we've established on this work plan and what all is moving forward, especially with regard to those 2 items, do you envision our sequencing to be compatible with the county staff's work in these 2 areas?
Well, that's a great question. Partly, our work plan is based on the direction of this committee, right? So obviously we have a capacity to do an amount of work in any given period of time. But we kind of shuck and jive as the council gives us priorities and as you'll give us priorities. So I think that could work. We're certainly in the trenches right now with the low impact development audit tool, and we have a timeline to hopefully start bringing that back late spring, early summer. The staff is right now doing the audit tool and we'll have something back. So that probably fits pretty well. Like number 3, I think is pretty well timed because we'll be talking about trees hopefully today, maybe one more meeting, and then kind of go back and hopefully finish up wetlands. So I think we're good up until 3. Oh, we have 2 3s on this list. Oopsie.
No, we had said that.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
That's not a
Those,
typo.
okay, okay. Oh, right, okay. And then, so I think those are all good. I think that it gets a little fuzzier when you get out to 4, 5, and 6. And we kind of, I think, talked about this where, there's always the ability to move things around as we get closer to those. So I guess it doesn't stress me out, I guess, if that's what you're asking. Can we fit that in? It also kind of goes along with, like, number 5 in particular goes along with a lot of the work we're doing right now with our vulnerability assessment and the resilience work. So I think, I think the timing will be okay. Yeah.
John?
Yeah.
Yes. And I looked at this list too and said, wow, we've got a lot of work to do in 11 meetings. And I don't know the realistic value to this being done in 2024. However, it's not a bad thing to have it on there, but I don't think the way we move as a committee that we're going to get past number 3 or 4 throughout this year. Just input. And by putting it in there, does that lock us in, council? Or
No.
okay.
If I may, just for a second, one of the things we discussed last month was our approach to how we would be a little bit more efficient, because we're all scarred from the tree ordinance experience. So we are asking, and we'll see it in practice today if we get there quick enough. We have asked staff to highlight the big issues, but not get us hung up on the numbers of each little ordinance item, so that we can discuss what matters and they can craft the language and we can review that. Did I fairly state that? Which, if you recall, and why we're scarred, was we were trying to go through every single line item of the ordinances. So hopefully we have learned something in the past year. I'm optimistic. Suzanne and then Wendy? Yes. Yes. We missed you, but we understand. Suzanne?
I have a question pertaining to this list. Has any of, has the county or anyone in this meeting, because last meeting was my first meeting, brought up any funding in any of these categories? Because funding would make a difference, I would think. So, like, for example, there's money for IRL projects, for example. I'm just pointing that out. There's every category probably has its own set of grants or funding available. So has funding ever been discussed either by this committee or has staff ever brought it up?
It's the remit of the committee, Suzanne, is to examine the land development codes.
Oh no, I know.
Yeah.
I
So
get it.
neutral to the funding.
Okay, well, funding matters to me, even with the goals of the committee. So I have the question standing.
So,
Can I jump in here real quick? When we went through, and Clay Irvin, by the way, nice to meet you. This body was an outcome of a discussion we had regarding our permitting process. So the focus was solely on looking at the land development regulations and how those can be updated and improved upon as they pertain to both Chapter 50 and Chapter 72 of the code. There wasn't necessarily a direction to start looking at expansion of water quality programming or environmental programming that would involve, say, acquisition or other types of capital expenditure tied to those purposes. Is that what we're?
Okay, so let me reword this in a general, not pertaining, but pertains to what I'm asking. Does any one of those categories have more money, funding involved?
Funding, I guess the critical question is, what do you want to fund?
Never mind. It's a legitimate question, but I don't know another way to ask it. So I'll ask it. I'll get with you after the meeting.
Here, maybe,
don't wanna hold
let me
up-
try to interpret. Tell me if this is right. So our mission here is to look at the code and rewrite the codes. We did get funding for low impact development. We got a grant through Department of Economic Opportunity to help us look at low impact development codes throughout the state and make recommendations for us. And we are using that work. So that grant wrapped up, I don't know, June of last year, right? But we got a body of work through that grant. We're using that as we go forward with low impact development. I'm not aware of other grants out there that help us look at our code and modify our code. Certainly, there's lots of grant funding out there to implement projects. And the staff does look at those things for project related costs. Like right now, I'm in the middle of writing a $50 million NOAA grant that's due this week. That if you think that I'm crazy, I am right now. So we do look for grant funding for project related things. It's just often there's not money to do the kind of work that we're looking at now, with the exception of that low impact development grant that we did get.
And we can tie into the Department of Commerce because annually they put out approximately 25, sometimes up to $50,000 in local assistance grants. That funding cycle has not been opened up yet. We'll look at that if we can meet their criteria. Typically, it's tied to an economic development perspective, but we have been able to utilize it for other similar types of uses.
Does that help?
But some, yes. And then I'll talk to them afterwards as to the rest. I don't want to hold up the meeting.
And I want to apologize for my breach of etiquette. You might rethink your votes in not having staff introduce themselves. So we can.
We did meet Donna last week, with the exception of Clay. So yeah, sorry, Clay.
Who just introduced himself.
And we also have over here hiding in the back of the room, Todd Hanna. He's with our environmental permitting activity. So
I do, it is important to remind everyone, and especially Suzanne, our annual report actually indicates that we moved low impact development up in the priority schedule to work on it because you did have a grant. And so when there is monies made available that relate to the work, it might not fund specifically writing the ordinance, but it relates to the work. We are recognizing it and reprioritizing as necessary. And even your work on sea level rise, vulnerability assessment is tied into it. And the Regional Planning Council, as well as the state, is coming forward funding work that will become critical to this effort.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you for bringing us back to that topic. That was the nature of my question. Ginger, can you explain it a little bit more detail for us? The vulnerability assessment is something that is state mandated, or is that something we're doing, or that's something we're doing in partnership with East Central Florida Regional Planning Council? How does that effort then dovetail in with a thing that was on the consent agenda yesterday that was a resolution to demonstrate leadership to the Army Corps that for a coastal resilience feasibility study? Like, where does that fit into the package, and what are going to be the deliverables from those? Will they be developing new ordinance language for us, for the county, that we would then review before it went to council? Can you just talk a little bit about all those pieces?
sure. So environmental management currently has a Resilient Florida grant to revise our vulnerability assessment based on state criteria. So the state 2 sessions ago required that local governments have vulnerability assessments that measure vulnerability to sea level rise and storm surge, and how they defined critical assets. And so we actually in Volusia County had a vulnerability assessment, and we had adopted sea level rise curves already. We had done that work in partnership with the Planning Council. But the state said everybody has to use this same curves, the same predictions, and you need to identify your critical assets. So they funded that work as well. So they said, hey, you need to do this, but also we're going to give you the money to do it. So that was good. We contracted with the Regional Planning Council, and we're getting preliminary results right now. The final project won't be done really till the end of the year. But basically, that's looking at the NOAA 2017 sea level rise projections, the intermediate high, is the upper bound of that. And they're using that and also storm surge based on higher sea level rise to identify where our vulnerable areas are, in particular, what they're calling all these critical assets, which is, I mean, kind of what you think they are, right? Like hospitals and schools and infrastructure type stuff. So, and the reason to do that, if you were a county that maybe hadn't done it before, is that the Resilient Florida program has significant dollars available to do mitigation projects for these vulnerable critical assets if they've been identified, right? And so this will position all of us, the county and the cities, to be able to go after that grant funding to actually make changes to these assets to make them more, what's the right word? Less vulnerable, more resilient, less vulnerable, right? So that's happening right now. We're also doing a whole series of public engagement related to that. We're doing like social media stuff on Facebook, real basic, like what does resilience mean? What does sustainability mean? Those sorts of things. But we're also doing a series of public meetings. The first one is tomorrow for elected officials and government officials, but there'll be a public one as well. And then there'll be a second set for each of those groups. That's coming up. So that's what we're working on. And that will inform, I think, the work of this committee, in that it will give us an idea of the amount of vulnerability we have in the county. There'll be a sort of phase 2 to that, which takes into account rainfall. This current one doesn't, but in other areas, rainfall has actually been a real big issue, and we've seen that just anecdotally, right? So there'll be more to come on that. But so where that I think fits in with us is we'll see that there are areas of this county that are vulnerable. And then the question is, and it's not going to come out of the work from the Planning Council, but then the question will be, should there be regulatory solutions to some of that, right? Should we help people understand how to build in these areas or whether to build in these areas? Now, those are policy questions outside of the work that's being done. So that would be maybe this committee. It would certainly be the county council. Like, does that then inform some change to our regulatory framework? The other study, the thing that went to council yesterday, is actually being managed by our coastal division. And that is in response, of course, to the storms that we had in 2022. We lost like 6.6 million cubic yards of sand. And the state gave us a significant amount of money, like $80 million, to do sand projects on the beach, to bring sand back. Part of that is being used to fund a plan, right? Like, okay, you got $80 million to put sand on. Well, what's the right way to do that? And so there's that study, which is being funded by the grant money. And then there's also this idea of, there are places in Florida and other areas where they have a managed beach, where sand placement happens on a regular basis, and they become federal projects. And so there's a partnership with the Army Corps to do this study for a beach management plan. And that really would then identify how to become one of those managed beaches, so that when we have these significant erosion events, we're eligible for FEMA money to bring sand back. We are not right now because we don't have a beach management plan. And that was a decision by the county council, many councils ago. But so they do all tie together. Of course, no one group in the county has the bandwidth to do all of this. So that's coastal division. That's really their bailiwick. We're involved in that, and it will inform less, I think, about regulatory decisions and more about, budgeting and how often and where and when do we do renourishment. Is that?
The critical element about the coastal project is that's what keys us into the Army Corps process, because otherwise we would not have eligibility for the federal funds for it.
They won't undertake any renourishment if there's been any mitigation, is my understanding, but I'm going off in a different direction.
I'm going to take it down to a more basic level, if you put the sand on it and you touch it and you're not using their money, you own it and you're not going to get their money ever again.
Or if you put up a secant wall in the natural habitat zone.
Yes.
Okay, back to our work plan. Any further question? Suzanne, you have another question? Any other questions about the work plan? I'll entertain a motion. Oh, we don't need to move on that, right?
Not necessarily. This work plan is already attached to the council agenda item. The agenda item is scheduled for February 20th, which is an evening meeting. It starts at 4 p.m. I'm not clear yet about whether this item will be on the consent agenda or whether it will be a discussion item. The agenda conference is next week. Tomorrow. And we'll know more then. And so I'll let everybody know. But if we assume that we're going to do a small presentation, right, either if it's on consent and gets pulled or it becomes a discussion item, I will do a brief introduction and presentation of the annual report and the work plan. Hopefully the chair or at least some, representative from the committee can be there to provide remarks as well. And any of you who would like to attend and, put in a public participation card, that would be wonderful. But I just don't know quite yet where on the agenda it's going to be.
I would imagine it's going to be for discussion purposes. I don't think it will stay on consent.
So recapping all of that, I intend to go to that meeting. I've already put it in my agenda, and it would indeed be wonderful for as many members to be there as possible and perhaps speak in public comments. I think that we've spent something like 450 hours just in this room, not to mention all the work that we do at home, reading, studying, understanding. And I think that matters. That's my editorial on that, but support for the work that we've done. So thank you. And you'll be, Suzanne.
So I personally think it would be a stronger message if there was a vote, even if it's not required, to show that the committee stands for this, hopefully unanimously, especially after the last. So I'm going to move that we pass to support that work plan that's on the screen.
Any second?
I'll second.
Jack Surratt seconds the motion by Suzanne Schreiber. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is the topic of the wonderful gopher tortoise. I'm sorry, Jack.
One is in the case of the county council meeting, are we in a long list of all of them, or are we alone in discussing?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so the council has talked about discussing all of the boards and, which ones are needed and what they do, can they be combined? Yes, this is just a meeting about our work plan and annual report. Whether the council brings up how they feel about this committee or how they want the committee to go forward, I cannot predict, but this is just about us. It's not combined with any of the other boards.
And so this really isn't the meeting that it is evaluating whether we should exist.
No, this is our required report
Okay.
by statute.
But nothing to say that conversation won't happen, right? I don't know. Right.
We should be prepared, even if it's on the consent agenda, we should be prepared to talk about our work plan and our annual report. And it may morph, as an avid council watcher, it may morph into a discussion about this committee.
Let me ask a philosophical question that maybe is inappropriate, but maybe, and perhaps Clay could answer. I did view the meeting yesterday, which you were kind of put on the hot seat. And you know, because I think what we do is we evaluate these issues to get ahead of them. In other words, you know, a lot of these codes haven't changed in many years, and yet the county has. And so is there a relevant connection to us doing this work to preempt the kind of problem we've ended up with in the Belvedere tank farm? Is there a parallel to us getting ahead of that versus dealing with it after the fact?
You always want to have your codes up to speed and consistent with your goals, objectives, and policies. It is always a tool that staff can utilize in providing information to landowners when they're doing their due diligence and trying to figure out what to do. It's also there to help protect you as a staff member when you identify a flaw in a plan and indicate where staff would approve with a condition or deny. So yes, it does provide a valuable tool to the staff here as we go through and review different applications to ensure that we're up to date.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Go for tortoises. Oh, Jack.
Question. This is a different, it's kind of on the same subject. My question here is, you know, when we talked last time, we discussed addressing the subject of the committee with each of our, you know, council members. And I was wondering if that took place. Did we have that conversation, or is that something that's still left out there?
I did not. I should have, but I didn't. Has anybody had a discussion with anybody who's been on the committee a long time? Sarah Lee? Okay, great. Bill? Take the temperature of your appointer. Okay.
I had the conversation and and got the support in the case of Troy Kent. He is sounded like a very strong supporter of this committee. So that's at least worth mentioning.
Who appointed you, Bill? And do you feel comfortable sharing the temperature in that room?
We're kind of going into government in the sunshine violation.
Okay.
By conveying over, because it's going to be an item that the council is going to be discussing, and they will be taking final action on. I don't mean to play attorney, Chris, just.
That makes sense, actually. Thank you.
You can say that you talked with them and you can indicate some things, but I just.
Yeah, they do have the potential to listen to the minutes for this meeting.
Okay, let's err on the side of caution and cease this discussion. But we should talk to our members. Thank you. Now, Jack, may we move on to Ginger, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to start, but Keith's going to do more of the talking. So I think you recall we have talked about it here that at a meeting in the fall, one of the council members brought up the Go for Tours ordinance and was concerned that perhaps it was getting in the way of folks trying to develop their lots, and it was maybe burdensome or you know, not working. So we have a little PowerPoint that just sort of gives the facts about our Go for Tours ordinance, and we shared this information with VCARD and to ask their opinion because they were very involved in the Go for Tours ordinance adoption. They actually were very helpful in getting that approved because of the things that were going on in the county at the time. They were supportive. So we reached out to them, and they have provided feedback to the council on their thoughts on the Go for Tours ordinance, and you have that information. But so I'm going to let Keith do a little brief presentation about sort of what we do, and then we can talk about the VCARD letter. I don't know that there's any action that we need to take, but I wanted to follow up on that issue because we have talked about it.
Okay, The gopher tortoise ordinance protects gopher tortoises in their burrows and a 25-foot buffer. Gopher tortoise is a keystone species, and it protects, more than 350 different other species. Yeah, I don't want to read it word for word, but we enacted the gopher tortoise ordinance, and we go out and we look at each individual site. So we get an inspection for a house, any type of structure. We have boots on the ground. The state doesn't. So that's why we enacted our ordinance. FWC doesn't know when we're issuing clearing permits. They don't know when we're issuing building permits. So our inspectors go out and utilize our mapping system. Yeah.
I just love to talk up our county when I can. There's a neat little point left out of that Clay can tell me if I'm wrong, or Ginger maybe. This is such a balanced county between our environmental work and our development work that we were actually asked to draft this ordinance as a model for the use of the state. And I am particularly proud of that as a longtime Volusia County person. So I just had to say that. Sorry.
So we utilize our mapping system to determine areas that are potential gopher tortoise habitat. Anything that comes in with our building permit process that's within those areas get an inspection by our inspectors. Again, we're looking for construction activity within 25 feet of the borough or anything that's going to impact the borough. Typically, if there's some structure, something that can be moved or relocated, we advise the owners of the parcel or the applicants, hey, if you shift something over here, you won't have to do a relocation. There are tons of times when the relocation is unavoidable. And at that time, they go through and get their permits from FWC and they hire Bill. And he comes out and does the relocation, removes the tortoise to a recipient site, and the construction moves on. The ordinance allows for a fee. The fee was adopted by council. It's $100, and that's way lower than hiring a consultant to come out and check the property. So it's extremely low. But if there are gopher tortoises on site, then they're still going to have to hire a consultant to come out, do the surveys, and do the relocation. So our fee is basically just to come out, check, see if you have the habitat, see if you have the tortoises, and then provide information and assistance to the owners and applicants to move forward with their process. What? Oh, yeah, it does not have higher standards than the state. So again, here you see some of the prohibitions that you can't, you can't kill, can't harm, can't harass, can't fill the gopher tortoise burrows or in their entrances or impact them. Clearing, grading, paving within 25 feet of the burrow is prohibited. And again, Volusia County does not have additional standards. So there's just a schematic of how the building permit review process goes and kind of explain a little bit. Is it within that area? Yes. Then, we're going to do the inspection. If there's a tree or wetland review, the applicant doesn't get charged an additional fee. So for those areas that already have a tree fee on them, they're not getting charged that $100 gopher tortoise review fee. That is at that point in time free. So yeah, if they have burrows, will the burrows be impacted? If so, they need a permit. If not, we would have them put in gopher tortoise protection. They put in silt fencing to keep the gopher tortoises out of their building site, and then we would issue their permits. This just covers the types of FWC permits. Again, and then like we said, we have reinspection fees. If you're not, you call us out to do the gopher tortoise protection, and we come out and it's not installed, you're going to get a reinspection fee. It's going to fail. You're going to get the reinspection fee. We'll tell you why it failed. We'll have to come back out and do another inspection. If you're impacting, we come out and you've already cleared the site and you've already impacted boroughs and their buffers, then you have a late fee of $499. So in this slide, you see how many inspections we've done. 37% of the total inspections that we've done actually got a review fee. The rest of them were free. Only 4% of the ones that had gopher tortoises had a second inspection, a repeat inspection. Okay. So some of the benefits of our gopher tortoise ordinance, it's low cost versus private consultants. We've actually talked to several consultants, and that was the range of the fees that they charge just for to come out and kind of check. That's not like a full survey or any relocations. And we've discussed this with FWC multiple times. So then they've told us that Volusia County has a low rate of disturbed site permits because of our process. And it provides better protection for the gopher tortoises and the other species.
Wendy, and then Suzanne. Microphone, please. Sorry.
Going back to the map, I see that the cities are excluded from the gopher tortoise overlay. Do the cities themselves have equivalent ordinances that they are enforcing, inspecting and enforcing also, or are the cities just kind of exempt from this? Because obviously there can be gopher tortoises inside of city limits.
Our gopher tortoise ordinance is not a minimum standard, so it's not required throughout the county. It's only in Chapter 72. And I'm not aware of any city or municipality in Volusia County that has their own ordinance. But the FWC rules apply.
Suzanne?
Can you go back to the slide that had the fees on it, please? The $499 late fee, is that regardless of the number of gopher tortoises?
Yes.
None of our fees are per tortoise. Our fee is just about the site. When you get to permitting, if you have to relocate them, then the FWC costs are per tortoise, or, they're lumped, or, a certain number. But ours is about that development site, that permit. There's one fee for us to go out and inspect it. There's another fee if we go out to inspect and you didn't do what you were supposed to do and we have to come back, right? So that's staff time. And so there's a reinspection, and then the late fee is just per site if you did bad things before we got there.
So I'm a little confused then. FWC does their own inspection, or you guys report to FWC?
We would report it to FWC. Let's say we had previously been out to the site and had GPS points of the boroughs. We would notify FWC, here are the GPS points, here is a picture of the borough. And we also place a placard on site that explains, what the borough is, what a gopher tortoise is, and the requirements of permitting on site. So we would take that information, we would send it over to FWC. They would have to get a disturbed site permit with FWC. Then they could also send out an officer and do a criminal case if they choose. I would say that's very rare.
Could we recap, and I'm going to go to John in a second. Could we recap that as saying that the county is an inspection arm and that the permitting is FWC?
Correct. Yeah. It's like I said earlier in the presentation, that we're the boots on the ground. The biologists in Ocala or Tallahassee, wherever they're at, they're not out here inspecting the sites, making sure that people aren't clearing burrows or their habitat or their buffers. We're the ones issuing these building permits, these clearing permits. We're doing the inspection, and then we're helping the applicants be compliant with state and county ordinances.
Thank you. John, did you still have something? And then Wendy.
Well, what drives the inspection is basically our mapping system, and it maps out habitat by soil type and vegetation type. And we actually go a little bit beyond those types of areas to ensure we cover all of that. But yeah, that's what drives it. When our permitting system flags that this parcel is in one of those mapped areas. But we have other inspections, tree inspections, wetland inspections on other properties. And sometimes you'll find them in areas that aren't mapped, but it's very rare. The golf course map is pretty broad.
So.
It catches most
if
of
I'm
it.
just an average citizen, if I'm in your color code, then I know I need to get a permit. But if
No.
I've got.
No, not a permit.
Inspection, sorry.
An inspection, right.
And then, but what if you're one of those that is in the white or the gray or the blue areas and there are gopher tortoises and you don't get an inspection?
And well, I mean,
You're
most of the
not
areas,
required to have an
yeah.
inspection.
Yeah, most of the other areas, excuse me, that are, I'm colorblind, so I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna pick out some of the areas. Some of those areas that you've mentioned are wetland, and you're not gonna find them in that area. And some of the areas that you've mentioned are within the incorporated areas, and you're not gonna get a building permit or inspection from us. There, you could all,
Do the cities inspect?
no,
Okay, so if you're in an incorporated area, then you're not required to have an inspection, irregardless.
Right, you're always required to comply with state law, right? So it's the property owner's responsibility to,
But for the
meet the
county,
state law,
That's not,
right?
that's not your jurisdiction, that's theirs.
It's not, and so we're not doing the inspections. So if we don't do an inspection for whatever reason, you're not on our map or you're in a city, those gopher tortoises are still protected. It's just that, it's on the property owner to make sure they do what they need to do.
One final question pertaining to agriculture. There is an exemption for agriculture, correct?
yes, there are exemptions for bona fide agricultural uses and activities, as in the state. Ours matches the state's.
Just to kind of feed on to that, if you look at the response that we got from VCARD in regards to it, you'll see that the service that we provide is a preventative measure. Not only is it preventing injury to the habitat or the animal, but it's also protecting the private property owner, because after the fact permitting through FWC is not an easy process.
Mhm.
And it can become expensive. It can become cumbersome. So if we can, as part of our standard permitting review process, and I'm going to brag on our Amanda permitting system, because we're able to take the GIS data that's available and it's translated into the individual parcels. So a parcel shows up as for a building permit, it's flagged. So Keith and his staff and Todd and his staff are aware that. So what you'll see then is it basically condenses and eliminates potential problems with property owners that they would be facing because of the species being on their property. And it helps get a more effective and efficient method of addressing, is there a protected species there, making sure it's protected and getting it taken care of, and avoiding down the road implications.
Yeah. Well, we've also had people show up or call in and state that a lot that we issued a tree removal permit for had gopher tortoises on it. And they've called FWC. And we've been on site, boots on the ground. We know there were no gopher tortoise burrows there. And we've worked with the FWC. They called us, was like, no, there were no gopher tortoises there. We did the inspection. And, the officers, take that information and provide it to their biologists. And, it kind of offers a level of protection.
So this is not the county's responsibility, but it does raise the question that Wendy started out asking, I think. So in the cities, yes, the gopher tortoise is a listed species, and yes, it is protected by all the weight of the FWC's ordinances and laws. But if there is no inspection arm, like there is for an unincorporated Volusia County, then really it's just up to citizens calling FWC. Those gopher tortoises don't have the layer of care that they receive through the county. Is that correct?
Well, what you would wind up is it's a self-reporting requirement for developers. It's a self-reporting requirement for homeowners. And the fact is, if they don't and it's called into FWC, they're facing some serious consequences.
Yeah. We run a lot of people just, they don't know. They don't know about gopher tortoises. I mean, so many people are building a house. We show up, we're like, hey, you've got gopher tortoise. They're like, what is that? You know, and sometimes they're adjacent to the site, and we do, you know, we always try to provide education and explain what we always hand them. We always have these placards ready and hand them out.
Thank you. I suspect Jessica's going to talk about what I was going to say. The unscrupulous developers and the V-card letter.
Say that's really. I did want to say one that I think that the county rule, and I'll wear two hats too, because I'm V-card chair, so I'll touch on that in a second. The county rule is 100% a public service in my mind. It is an absolutely amazing thing that the county takes on to protect the species and provide protection to property owners. There is always a requirement in local governments for large scale development, not, you know, single family home permits, that when you submit your surveys and things like that, you have all listed species and things noted. And so that's where they should be reviewing that at that phase. But they don't have the proactive steps like the county does. I just wanted to say, as a precursor to the V-card letter, there are recommendations in there. I think that we just have too many lawyers on our committees. So apologies. But the key from V-card was that it's an amazing program. We're 100% supportive if you wanted to go an even further step to help protect the property owners, because sometimes they don't know because it's the builders and things like that. That's where the V-card recommendations come from.
So that the property owner is not dinged, the developer that didn't advise them gets the.
Primarily, it's the
Thank you.
contractor that y'all are wanting. What we read into V-card was instead of tagging a property owner for something that the contractor did on their property, and we're looking at it, it is allowable under code enforcement law, because this is how we would handle it. It's just that, unfortunately, the way code enforcement is forced through state law to be implemented, it's better to go after a property owner because you can't attach a lien to that property. Trying to go after contractors and folks like that can be very difficult, especially if they're, let's be very honest, fly by night, and they show up and they come in, grade fill, get your site all great, you know, ready for construction, and they're gone.
Yeah, there's just no way to stop them from passing on that cost. They're going to add it to something else. They're going to pass on that cost. It's just.
And there is.
But we are looking at that.
Great. I
Thank you.
think what part of the inspiration was, just on full background, is Ormond does that for their tree removal violations. They violate the tree company instead of the owner. So they might have some insight. It's been wonky and enforcement on our side to see that, but we were like, what do you mean you're enforcing against the company? But they're the ones who should know. So that's why they do it that way.
So you're going after Bob, the neighbor down the street with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Okay, any more discussion? Suzanne, sorry.
You had said that V-card had reviewed this when it was put together. I couldn't tell from what you said. Did anyone else originally work on this when it was all drafted before?
It was environmentalists, the county staff, the Builders Association, and V-card, to my understanding.
Back in the early 2000s, when this was first coming to light, there was basically a coalescence of all entities who are focusing on this, from the development side as well as the environmental side. So it was identified, and FWC was involved in the discussion about how it could be put together. County staff was, as was other environmental groups. They were part of it, and it took, Keith, how many years? Almost 3.
Yeah.
To finally come to fruition.
It's like 4 years, yeah.
4
years.
2006 to 2010. Jack, Suzanne, did you have more on?
Yeah. When was the last time the fees were reviewed?
The fees get, what?
What fees?
Yeah, the fees go up every year with the CPI, Consumer Price Index. Every year they go up a percentage.
And we didn't institute the fees right away. In the first several years, we did not charge the fee at all, as you know, folks got used to the process. So the ordinance passed in 2010, and I think We have in here, yeah, I think it wasn't until like
The deck says 2018.
2018 until we started charging the fees. So, and now they go up by the CPI every year. So they go up with inflation.
And one more question. When was the last time it was reviewed?
The ordinance reviewed, not since it's been adopted. Which you see is like really good compared to the wetland ordinance and the tree ordinance, which are, 30 years old. So
Mine's a simple question based on VCARD's requests. Is the 14 days reasonable? It said that
I mean, we typically review it before then.
right, okay.
Yeah,
I thought,
yeah.
I just as an aside too, following up on part of Suzanne's question. I don't know about the past 6 months or so, but the Environmental Council always received notification as well, just like VCARD, if there are comp plan changes that are environmentally focused or things like that. So the county does continually seek the opinion of various groups to weigh in on things.
One thing about permitting, I need to kind of clarify, and it has nothing really to do with the actual environmental standards, and it has more to do with state mandated shot clocks for us as local governments. Up until probably 2 years ago, each local government set its own time frame for review, completion, acceptance, processing, and how many requests for additional information they could have. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the state has come in and mandated very specific standards. Initially, they kind of used a one-size-fits-all model that was adapted for the water management districts, for our site planning, our land development regulations, and to a certain extent our building. But then they truncated it even more, such that if a local government was not able to get a single family building permit out within 10 days of it being deemed complete and no additional RAIs, requests for additional information, that for every day after 10, the local government gave up 10% of their fees. And so what we at Volusia County used to do would take non-building code items such as zoning, environmental, land development, development engineering, and we would broadcast the plans out to all of our reviewers, and the reviewers could enter in their comments, and as soon as they put it into Amanda, it was sent to the applicant. So they were getting real-time comments from our reviewers so that way we could do it as expeditiously and thoroughly as possible. But because, and I forgot, we're only allowed 3 RAIs. So therefore, we couldn't just have the blast of each individual because they counted as one. So now what we are doing is we can't send out all of our RAIs until everybody's completed their review. Realistically, we cannot have environmental being able to do all of the things they have to do within that 10-day time frame. And because it's not tied to the administration of the Florida Building Code, it is not associated for a building permit. So what we've done is we've bifurcated our permitting process. So before you can get a building permit, you have to get clearance that your zoning, your land development, your environmental, your land, your engineering aspects, all of that is clear before we will accept the building permit, so that way I'm joining in with y'all. I've got crickets. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that that was the situation, because right now there is some concern from the amount of time it's taking to get building permits. And I have to tell you, it's not because of our county staff or our county process. It's us having to adapt to what the state has mandated for us to do. So when we start seeing is 14 days, yeah, those are reasonable, but it's going to have to be a situation that it can't be tied to a building permit. It's got to be one of those situations. And just for your information, that now is going to be no longer 10 days. The original House bill was 1 day. Now it's, I believe, 3 or 5 or no, it was originally 1 calendar day, which meant we would have to have people working Saturdays and Sundays, because we have the ability to submit 24 hours, 7 days a week through our electronic online permitting. So now it's out to, I believe, 5 business days, which will give us a little bit of a relief, but I'm still looking at a manpower shortage and a situation of diverting resources, focusing solely on permitting rather than some of the other tasks that we could have them doing. If y'all don't mind me, that was the chair calling me. I'll be right back.
And Jack, if you're through chirping. Oh, Jack was dinging, pinging. Oh. Okay.
Okay, so acknowledging that our current permit is, or current ordinance is not more restrictive than state, although it could be allowed to be. So my question is I have 2 questions. One is a biological question. Is the 25-foot, did you say radius or diameter from the borough entrance? Total, okay, so total diameter 25 feet. That protects the burrow and the animal inside the burrow, but it doesn't take into account at all the foraging range and home range of the animal. And so is it even effective? And this is a biological question. Is that even an effective protection area if it's not protecting anything about the required habitat and foraging range? Is, I guess another way to say it is that just a meaningless level of protection, really. And so before you answer that, my other question is related is, I know we do have some recipient sites within the county, right? Do we still? Okay. Okay. So, all right. I thought we had some of our Tiger Bay or Tomoka or something. Okay. How far away do our tortoises go when they get relocated? Are they going out of, I mean, they're going out of the county, obviously. I'm looking at the experts across the room. And again, if you're putting them into sites that are already, I mean, have they been evaluated for what density is appropriate? Is there enough food in those places? Wouldn't it be better if we could relocate them as close to their original home as possible as a general principle, and invoking low impact development every chance I get? One of the principles here is to set aside the native habitat and green spaces within the building site. And, and again, within Victoria Park, when that was approved and developed 20 some years ago, 450 acres of conservation land was set aside. And some of the gopher tortoises from the built areas were relocated into those conservation areas, as far as I can read in the FWC permit. So wouldn't it be nice if we could actually just relocate them, a few hundred feet away, rather than across the county or across the state? So,
Well, that's multiple questions, but so depending on the habitat type, whether that's enough foraging area, you can have a burrow in an area that's poor habitat, and that, let's say it's completely covered with sand live oaks, and there's not much foraging area, then obviously you wouldn't have enough area there. You can have an area where they have everything they need to forage, and it would be a better site, and that 25 feet's probably still not enough, but it may do the job. So it's very dependent on the site that you're looking at. You can relocate the tortoises up to 100 miles, but that was suspended by the governor. I don't know if that was ever reenacted. Was it reenacted recently, a couple of months ago? I think I remember seeing an email about that. But yeah, so within 100 miles, that's the distance unless it's suspended by the governor. Obviously, if you have enough area for on-site relocation, that's what, we recommend. It's cheaper that way. I'm sure, Bill, you guys, if there's on-site relocation, I'm seeing you guys do a bunch of on-site relocations. We want to keep as many tortoises as we can. It's just, they have to go to a recipient site if they don't have enough forage area, they don't have enough space, and we don't have any currently in the county. And I think the one that we are going to open up that's on county property, I think that's just going to be for county projects. It's not going to be to the public. That answer, to get it all right, Bill?
25-foot is just the regulatory distance. You got to pick a distance. And when you relocate them, it costs $6,000 per tortoise to send them to the recipient site. And they are, you can only go 100 miles north-south. It is, of course, better to leave a tortoise on his own property. And if you can, certain FWC permits, you can't relocate on site. So anytime you can, you do. Port Orange has a recipient site, but they only have it for their own city. And then now the county will have their own. But there are no other sites in
Mitigation.
Yeah.
a wetland mitigation, right?
No, it's a good point. It was for a previous development from years ago. I used to be the columnist.
But so they don't accept.
They don't access it.
Yeah, there's nothing open to the public in the county.
Right. And your development was probably before they did the relocations, back when they had ITPs.
Yeah.
And you would identify where your tortoises were and then preserve that piece of land and then move your tortoises into there. The whole thing, the reason why this ordinance is in place is because the state went from ITPs, incidental take entombment, to just relocation. And then the county jumped on board and said, well, we can help and identify if you have tortoises or not. The rest of the cities and counties throughout the state, almost all of them, you're just on your own and there is no kind of watchdog, and that's what the county's doing.
And relocation sites, they have to meet a whole host of criteria by FWC. They've got to do, we were part of some of the stuff that, Bill and them have done with other recipient sites and carrying capacity, vegetation studies, surveys for how many tortoises you have there, availability, all that goes into it. And then it has to be in an area that's going to be, set aside in perpetuity and managed in such a way. So you're talking about fire, you're talking about plantings, it's a lot of work.
Wendy, you still have, is that all right? If we have finished talking about gopher tortoises to everyone's satisfaction, yes? Ginger?
Me. Wrap up. So, at one point there was a discussion that this was going to go back to council for discussion. We will be having a workshop with council about what permits we require and why, and what state mandates, et cetera. That's going to be a workshop that we don't know a date yet.
Not yet.
So we would expect that this discussion, rather than come up as a separate agenda item to council, this will be discussed during that permit workshop. So we'll keep you informed once we know when that's going to be. It should be a fun day. They have a lot to talk about. So this will just get kind of wrapped up with that.
Thank you very much, Ginger. And the reason I kept asking if we were through with gopher tortoises is because right on schedule, it's time for our break so that we can go through the rest of the of the meeting. So my watch says it's 2:25 right now. Reconvene 2:35.
Just for everybody's information, the preliminary draft for the agenda for February 20th shows that the ENRAC annual report and work plan is in the action items, so it's not on the consent agenda. and it's towards the end of the agenda. The good thing is that it's not a large agenda. Please contact your council member for clarification on that. So, not many. How you doing?
I watched the guy. Watching the video on his phone, driving or.
I didn't hear any of that, sorry.
All right, ladies, you all looking really alive back here today. We need some cheering going on here. Not Ginger looking over here like.
Seeing is what she sees, and so she's asking, and we're not like, oh, or yeah, that's what we're doing, is we're communicating.
She's sending signals. I noticed, you know, it's just.
Yeah,
No, she's
working in code back over there.
Yes.
We're just not saying anything, we're nodding and thumbs up, but you know,
Got it.
we support from behind.
Dr. Anderson, what's new? I want the real answer. Oh.
No, kid.
I had a brother-in-law pass last week. So. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to ask. It's bad.
That's really the wrong question.
Yeah, what's
Sorry.
good? Vice President accounted for.
Hey, Bliss,
would you
we
get them
see
in
that
their
you
seats,
have your
please?
hand raised, and I just want to let you know that the chat doesn't work for us. So if you have something to say, you'll probably just have to like shout it out and we'll stop for you.
Okay, thank you.
25. Okay. Thank you so much. What? That's what I thought. I'm calling the meeting back to order late at 2:40. And we'll take on the tree ordinance. And Suzanne has let me know that she'll have to leave a little bit early today, but I believe we still have quorum. And so does my vice chair.
Okay, so in the vein of we're going to talk about the big issues and not the little minutia, we're going to kind of do a little bit of a refresher on the tree codes at a relatively high level. Try to get through a presentation about what we have, and so for a lot of you, this will be review, and then we've tried to highlight what were the issues either that we heard from council or that we heard from the citizens or that the staff had identified as problematic or something that needed to be fixed, but really at a high level. So Keith is going to take us through the presentation. We put in a couple of slides just as a reminder about the purpose of the committee. Let me see.
Yeah, there's like three.
Yeah, the first couple of slides are just about the committee, the purpose. So I forgot about that.
Do we need to go over the purpose or are we good? Yeah. Okay, so the basic purpose of ENRAC is according to our home rule charter is recommending minimum standards to protect the environment, recommending corresponding implementing ordinances. So that's chapter 50 and chapter 72. And then any recommendations you have, we would take to council. So the charter requires that we have environmental minimum standards and to protect the environment and to prevent the destruction of county resources that belong to general public and other standards deemed necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Volusia County. So this is a portion of our chapter 72. This is our for our unincorporated areas. Remember, chapter 50 is for incorporated. Chapter 72 is unincorporated. So you'll hear us say that over and over and over again. So we just want chapter 50 is whole county. Chapter 72 is unincorporated. So it's just the purpose and jurisdiction of the trees. Trees are good, and it goes on, beyond that. And the jurisdiction of this division, like I said, just stated, is in the unincorporated areas. So this is where we start with our minimum standards again in our chapter 72 land development code. So some of the basic minimum standards that we have in chapter 50 are there, you need a permit to remove trees, and you have one tree per 2,500 square foot of lot space. After you do your permitting, you apply for your permits, that's what you're left with. It also requires 15% of the development to be in tree preservation areas, but it allows for waivers to that. So based on site-specific conditions, or if the municipality chooses to waive that section, they can per Chapter 50 requirements. It also requires the replacement of trees that are removed, and also has standards for historics and specimens. So here's a slide of what we brought to County Council about potential changes to the tree ordinances of Chapter 15, Chapter 72. Some of these you have voted on and asked for changes. Some of them we haven't discussed yet, and we'll get into what you've looked at and what you voted on in future slides. So this is Chapter 72, the basics of that. In discussing, residential owner occupied property and residential, not residential, but residential versus commercial. There's two different ways we permit the tree removal on those sections. It deals with tree protection, how trees are replaced when they're removed, and the minimum standards on each individual lots. And again, it also deals with specimens and historics and how they're saved and protected. So here's some of the exemptions and possible changes. The red stars are ones that you have voted on. We don't have the particular action up there, but for the elimination of historics and specimens, I believe the vote was to eliminate that exemption on owner occupied lots, given exemptions for requirements from the homeowners insurance,
Yeah.
right?
So just for the benefit of those who weren't here when we talked about this a year ago. So currently residential owner occupied property is exempt from tree permitting. Once you own a house, once you have a house on the lot and you live on it, it is your homesteaded property. You don't have any tree permit requirements, and that includes historic trees. So while you're building your house, we will protect those historic trees. Once you move into the house and maintain a residence there, you're exempt. And so we had talked about a possible change being eliminating that historic tree exemption, so that historic trees are protected regardless of whether it's owner occupied. Just historic trees in the county are protected, and you would need a permit if you wanted to remove it. The discussion that we had was lengthy, and just keep in mind too, any of these things that you already voted on, you could bring them back up for a different vote. But we just wanted to point out what the work that already got done. I'm not suggesting we start again, just saying that just because it's been voted on doesn't mean you can't still discuss it or whatever. But so the vote for that, as I recall, was to eliminate the exemption for historics, but to put in some language that said, if there's an issue with your homeowner's insurance, that you could provide some documentation that you're being required to remove it because of that, and then that would be exempt. So.
Ginger, may I ask, this is Bliss, may I ask what that vote was, 9-2 or whatever?
I'd have to look it up, so I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and while you're looking it up, I vividly remember the discussion because I was a big part of it. But we did not vote on agricultural lots with bona fide ag use. And if you review all those minutes from page 2, line 31, all the way through page 7, it does not mention bona fide agriculture or in there at all in those minutes. So I would respect or ask that we respectfully remove that second part.
Well, that's not saying that we have done it. I said just the stuff with the star at the end of it. We have, that's just possible changes to it, and that's something that we could still.
We did not discuss it. It was not discussed or voted on.
Yes.
A little bit further up in that paragraph.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So yes, so if it had a bona fide agricultural use, it's still exempt. That's not necessarily.
I do remember, we did discuss that. Right.
Please speak into the mic.
Sorry, Bliss.
Cultural zoning, but not have an agricultural exemption from the property appraiser.
Right.
That is basically the litmus test we utilize.
Mhm.
Because again, if someone is utilizing it for agricultural uses and it has the exemption, it should, from the property appraiser, it should have full rights under the Florida Right to Farm Act. If, however, we have 1 acre piece of land that's zoned A3 and is basically used for a single family home, I think that's a bit of a stretch of the intent.
Okay, I can respect that, but if you got a 40-acre plot that's zoned at A3 or whatever that zoning under agriculture, and it's not currently being utilized as bona fide agriculture, but is still zoned for it, it should be exempt because you still, the reason you have ag exemptions or ag assessments is because you are looking at the potential for future agriculture growth.
Let's also kind of clarify, we have so many different agricultural zoning classifications. You have forestry resource, which requires 25 acres. You have A1, which requires 10, all the way down to rural residential and rural agricultural. The transitional areas are where we start getting into allowance of more of your suburban type of uses. So those are the areas that we feel are secure there. When you have those larger tracts, I don't think you're seeing any problem with them getting the exemption from the property appraiser, even as, because it's either going to be silviculture, grazing, or those types, or pasture.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to affect that. I can tell you what we can do. We can look and see how many A1 or FR zoning parcels we have that don't have that exemption, and see if we're misrepresenting what should be done there.
Okay, I would like to see that, please.
You got it.
I just want to make sure I understand what we're going to do. So, can you restate what you said we're going to do?
Sure. As I'm talking to you, I'm going to be typing to Chris Cromer, asking him to start running the report. It's basically pulling all of the parcels that have A1 or FR zoning and determining how many of those have ag exemptions awarded by the property appraisers, and those that do not. Those that do not, we're going to study to see, first of all, why they don't have it and how this would impact them. Yes, sir.
So just A1 and FR, do you not want to look, do you want to look at all A's, or do you want to look at A1 and A2 because A3 and A4 are transitional and RA is transitional and for personal use? I mean, we can look at all the things that are not transitional or personal use and then get all that stuff back. So you're looking at like silviculture, that's typically going to be in like RC, FR.
Well, I mean, if we're looking at the large tracts, which are obviously going to be utilized for agriculture, because I'm just going to be upfront, we're concerned about folks saying that they're a farmer when in reality they're a developer. And so when you start looking at anything 5 acres or less, yes, you can be a gentleman farmer, and yes, you can figure out a way to get the ag classification. So you would be exempt from our tree preservation regulations, except for that 1 acre where your home may be. But I think that and a valid concern is that, are we overstepping for these larger tracts, which are obviously going to be utilized for farming and those types of things, to be able to make sure. So I would like to be able to do the initial review at A1 and FR. And then also then if we start seeing that there's a greater preponderance of overstepping then we start looking down at some of the other agricultural zones.
Because you can have a legitimate ag operation on 5 acres, part of your fern operation, for example, or you can have it as a holding pen or whatever for your cattle operation. You know, there are some uses for smaller acreage. But I hear what you're saying. You want to look at those that are multi-use for residential, et cetera. I get that.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Suzanne?
So I'm asking you to repeat what you said concerning there's no permit required. There was no permit required, but there was a vote for historic trees for permitting. Is that what I understood?
So under the current ordinance, historic trees are exempt on single-family owner-occupied lots. The vote of the committee, which I just looked up was unanimous, was to remove that exemption so that a historic tree on a single-family owner-occupied residential lot would no longer be exempt from permitting. You would need to come and get a permit if you wanted to remove it, except that we put in the exception being an emergency letter from a homeowner's insurance company requiring the removal. That's what was voted on.
If I may, Suzanne, just to kind of make it a little easier, because I sure wrestled with it. There's one standard for large developments and another standard for individual homes that are going to be built. And then within that, there was the contradiction that if you own the lot and you haven't built on it yet, and you're going to build on it, and there's a historic tree, you had to get a permit. But as Ginger pointed out, once you've homesteaded that, once you've built the home on the property, you could take down that tree with no permit at all. The change that the committee thus far has voted on was to require a permit after homesteading as well for an historic tree.
Why don't I just talk about some of the exemptions, the current exemptions, and explain those and how we treat that, and then the possible exemptions, because you weren't here when we first ran through this, and maybe that will help explain it to the new members. Does that sound good? So on the left side, you'll see that we have current exemptions in the Land Development Code. So all residential owner occupied properties, all trees on those properties are exempt, even historic and specimen trees. So that means you don't need a tree removal permit to cut them down. You don't have to have our permission to do anything. Even if you just built the house, you protected the historic tree through all the development. Once you get your CO, you move into the house, you can cut it down the next day. So that's one of the exemptions we currently have. Property, agricultural zone properties. So you have some like RA is exempt, and that's primary for an agricultural transitional area for personal use. It's not, you don't really see bona fide agricultural uses in RA typically. A3, A4, which are also transitional agricultural. You'll see lots of 1 acre, 2 acre lots in those agricultural zoning classifications. Their A4 is exempt. A3, the code says anything over 2.5 acres is exempt. And that's even if they're just building a single family residence and has nothing to do with bona fide agricultural use. So that's the trees in certain zoning classifications. And of course, when we talk about trees, it's always about condition. So even if you have a historic tree, if it's deteriorated to the point where death is imminent, it's something that we would exempt. So even in a situation where if you guys voted that you wanted to see historic trees protected on lots like you had previously done, it's still always about condition. They can come back with a certified arborist. They can do a certain level inspections. They can determine that, hey, this tree is completely hollow. It poses a significant hazard, and the tree needs to be removed. And then we wouldn't require a permit or replacement for that tree as well. So again, always about condition. The plants grown for sale are typically like nurseries. Like if you had, nurseries, oak trees grown in rows, and you were going to excavate those trees out and wrap them in burlap. You should like what we call B&B nurseries, ball and burlap nurseries. If they, let those go, and then those trees get large enough, we would consider those as part of trees being planted for sale and would be exempt from permitting and replacement requirements. And then we have the nuisance species that don't require any permit for removal, like you see up there, Brazilian pepper and camphor and Chinese tallow and all of those types of plants. And then on the right side, we have potential changes, and the ones with the star, like I said, were things that you had voted on, or this board had voted on. So
So the possible changes were identified either by discussions with council, things that we'd heard in the public, or things that we've seen over the years that work or don't work real well. So that's this list of possible changes. That doesn't mean that's the entirety of possible changes, but it was sort of the universe of like, let's narrow it down. So we can go through that. Some things the committee took action on, some things they didn't take action on before. So those are, all of that is on the table. Yeah, so I guess go.
yeah. And yeah. All right. So there's something on here that should be highlighted. So the increase in the rebuttable presumption timeframe number 2, the board did vote on that, and you voted to increase it from 3 years to 5 years.
Okay,
So-
and can you tell me the vote on that? 9-2, whatever.
It was motion carried 6-5 with Momberg, Lights, Gal, Fitzsimmons, and Hoblick opposed.
Okay, I do believe I was absent for that vote. And I'd like to go on the record of saying that had I been there, I would have voted no. And so therefore this motion would have died. And therefore it is not, a mandated recommendation for this committee.
Bliss,
Yes.
noted intent wise, is not how the voting record works, I think, for the committee. But we had a long discussion at that meeting about a vote of a commission being the board's voice, but that we as individuals maintained the right to reach out to county council members directly to say, you're getting recommendations from ENRAC. We just wanted to provide there was a robust discussion on this item. And if we have thoughts that are different from that recommendation that the board approved, which we could only modify, I think, by a motion for reconsideration, but that's too late. Chris can answer that. We can say, here are our concerns there, and it's ultimately up to council. I remember we went back and forth on that.
And generally the way it works is when someone's on the prevailing side of a motion, they're the ones who are entitled to bring it back for a vote.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
So the rebuttable presumption is in the general exemptions. And it's basically that if you have an agricultural piece of land and you clear it and you come in for a rezoning, a special exception, or anything in that criteria, it's presumed that if you cleared it within 3 years of that application, that you did it with the intent to develop the property. And then all the tenets of the tree removal and replacement requirements of the Land Development Code apply. Does that make sense? Okay.
And I have an issue with that. I mean, that is presuming that somebody was going to sell the property. What if, I don't know, whatever they're growing is, had a downturn and, it's not selling and they change their ag use from, trees to growing hay for their cattle.
Yeah,
And,
that's acceptable. It's when you go, it's not changing the agricultural use, it's changing the land use or a special exception or a rezoning or coming in for a final site plan. It's about something that's non-agriculture. You could certainly go from, silviculture to hay to yeah, peanuts to any row crops to cabbage. You could do any of that. But if you clear an agricultural property and then come in and say, I want to build a subdivision here and change the land use, then the rebuttable presumption applies. There are ways that you can rebut the presumption in the code. And if you feel aggrieved by the county forester's decision, you can always appeal my decision to the DRC, and then they can ultimately appeal the DRC's decision to county council. So it's not an end all be all. There are paths, to rebut that presumption.
Yeah,
Right,
and
so-
I just see this as a burden on the farmer. Because they've already been through the Volusia County property appraisers qualification to get the ag classification for bona fide use to begin with. I think it ought to really be up until the day that the property changes zoning. So as long as it has a, approved bona fide ag operation under Florida best practices management, I feel like this is double jeopardy. I mean, they operate legitimately.
Yeah, well, I'll say when we've seen this happen, it's typically not your actual farmer, right? Like, so if you've been farming this property for years and, whatever your operation, hay, cows, whatever, it doesn't prevent them, was it John that was you that said, the farmer's last crop is houses, right? It doesn't prevent somebody from converting agricultural land to something else. What it's intended to prevent is people saying, hey, I know, and because it takes multiple years to get through a site plan process, I know I'm going to grow houses here. So I'm going to cut down all the trees now. I'm going to wait a few years and then I'm going to build my houses, and I won't have to do any of the tree stuff because the trees are gone. When I come in for my site plan and you tell me I need a tree survey, well, that's easy because I have no trees. So it doesn't keep people from converting. It just keeps people from cutting down all the trees in anticipation of a development. And so the discussion was, is 3 years sufficient? And a lot of the discussion back then, last year was, it takes more than 3 years to get through a development process. So maybe 3 years isn't sufficient. The vote of the committee was to increase that rebuttable presumption to 5 years. And there is definitely an out. So if you're the property owner and we say, oh, we think you cut down all those trees in anticipation of development, there are ways that you can prove to us that that did not happen. And then, of course, there's the appeal process. So that is where we ended up last time, was extending that to the 5 years.
Well, I remember some of this conversation. I was gone for some of these votes. I still think that take silviculture. I think you're penalizing the silviculture, farmer. I think you are devaluing that property, and when it is a bona fide agricultural use, I still think it's a burden and it should be removed.
Bill?
So Bliss, right now, silviculture, if you have planted tree farm, you don't have to count those trees for development, do you? Anyways? You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
While it's a silviculture operation, it's exempt. It's just if you're, warehouser and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to build a neighborhood. I'm going to cut all these now. And then you come in with your site plan or your subdivision or your rezoning or whatever.
Jessica?
I just want to clarify, because I know we talked about this a lot, but we're revisiting. I say we're back. This is why we're all still on trees. There are, take Consolidated Sunoco. They don't exist anymore, so we can talk about them. Well, they do, but in a different form. They had a lot of timber crop that they obviously planted to have ready for development at some point. So they would come in, they'd take that all down and timber it, which is a bona fide agricultural use, and then develop their site. And so in that instance, they wouldn't have, they were in the county anyways, but they would have the record of, they have their best practices, they have the receipts from the sale and the takedowns, that would be exempt. They would just have to, if somebody said, we think you did this in preparation for development, they would say, we didn't, here's the proof of the bona fide agricultural use, and they'd move on, correct? For management.
Yeah. I mean, yes, you can rebut the presumption. There is a list that you can do that. And if I disagree with your list, you can always appeal my decision. And then if the DRC reviews it and they disagree with you and they, then you can appeal that to council. You can take it all the way up, and then ultimately that decision can be made by council.
John,
And this is just a what if, and I agree with if your normal agriculture practices are what they are. However, let's just say a silviculture operation did clear their land. And even after that harvest, that producer fell on hard times and he was wound up forced to sell his land now that it's been cleared. Would that potential buyer, potential developer, even buyer, fall under that clause as well, even if that farmer decided to sell?
Yeah, that would all be part of that rebuttable presumption that,
Right, but I'm just saying, so I'm on hard times, I'm broke, the harvest didn't get me out of the hock that I was in, I
Mhm.
gotta sell the land, a developer comes along and wants to buy it and develop it.
Mhm.
Does he fall under that 3 or 5 year presumption?
Yes, technically, but here's what we would take into consideration. You have a timber management plan, right? That those trees were harvested because it was the time to harvest those trees, right? Based on your plan. You grew them for whatever, 30 years, whatever. Now's the time to harvest. I harvest and replant. If that is consistent with the timber management plan, and then there's something that comes later, that's a different story than, I have this property and I'm going to clear it and I'll come see you for my development here in a couple of years, right? So there is room for common sense in the rebuttable presumption. We've only used it a handful of times, and in every case when we've brought it up, it was like, there's nice wooded property that now isn't wooded, right? And now I'm going to come in for my development. It's not the case where it's a real farmer that's, moved on.
thank you.
Well, I see it as inequitable, and I see it as penalizing this farmer. And I just do not think that as long as it is a bona fide classified, by the Volusia County property appraisers, agricultural use, I don't think this should be even included in the rebuttable presumption. And I definitely don't think the rebuttable presumption time should be increased.
Thank you, Bliss. I have a question for Chris. I think you clarified a few minutes ago that to change this vote or to bring it up again, it has to be the prevailing opinion.
That's correct, yes.
So this is a closed topic at this time?
Yes, correct.
All right. In the interest of proceeding with these deliberations, I'd feel better about closing out this topic if we may. Thank you.
All right, so we've covered the top two topics on the possible changes. What we would be discussing in the future or having you take a look at is removing some of the zoning classifications in our exemption list and adding conservation, which is the C. So again, in our general exemptions, RA is exempt, and RA is it's basically transitional agriculture, and it's for personal use. It's not for commercial agricultural use, as well as MH4. That's personal agricultural use. It states in the zoning classification that you can raise animals for your personal use, not for sale. So we didn't feel like that belonged in the exemption categories for the zoning. And again, in the general exemptions, there is language for exemption for A3 over 2.5 acres. And because of that over language, it requires you to have 2.51, not 2.5. So we would want to take out that over and just for A3 and just make it across the board for all the zoning categories, 2.5 acres or larger, or 2.5 acres or larger. So it's not 2.51. Does that make sense? So, much smaller lots, you're talking about 1 acre, 2 acre lots, they would no longer be exempt. And the A3 category, anything 2.5 and over would be exempt. Right.
Consequence of the way the language is written. Most lots, a lot of times when people do a subdivision, they subdivide into lots that are 2.5. And so right now, the way the language is written, the intent was probably that they be exempt, but they're not. They have to be greater than 2.5. So that it's really just a fixing an unintended consequence of the way something was written.
And then you did vote on, there was a lengthy discussion about road projects and land management projects. And you guys did vote to add this exemption. However, adding this exemption would not comply with the Chapter 50 requirements. So we couldn't add this exemption until we got to change the Chapter 50 requirements. So we discussed that. I just wanted to make you aware of that again.
Could you just very briefly explain why it's a little more difficult to change Chapter 50 than Chapter 72 for the benefit of our 2 new members?
Right. So Chapter 50, that's something that's any changes to Chapter 50 would have to go out for comment to the cities. And it's unlikely that any of the cities would want to self-impose additional restrictions.
That's true for most new restrictions, but this is an exemption, so I would think it would be pretty easy for the cities to go along with the exemption.
Could be.
It's just the process itself is greater because it requires review by the cities, whereas changes to Chapter 72 are just county ordinances, and not that there's not a lot of process to change a county ordinance, but not the same level of outreach to the cities.
So to not move forward with this because we haven't updated Chapter 50 means that we continue to have restrictions on how we're treating trees in airports, roadways, et cetera. Are you all doing a workaround right now for it? I mean, I thought this was one of those where we were just trying to update the language to reflect what you actually do.
Yes. So for one, I don't want you to think we're suggesting that we don't make changes to 50, just pointing out that there's a higher level of coordination. On airport protection, we have to follow FAA rules. So while the ordinance doesn't specifically exempt trees on airports, because the federal government requires certain trees to be removed, we haven't required permits for that, right? So road projects, sort of the same. I mean, DOT, it's not like DOT comes to us for a permit to remove trees, but it's not specifically stated that it's an exemption. So it's a little bit of a weird, we're in a weird place there because we see trees going down that technically need a permit, but we know they're not going to get a permit. So land management activities, kind of the same thing, right? They're doing good things on county conservation lands. So we wanted to just make it more clear.
But if you add C to the exemption list, that it really takes away the land development stuff because all those are zoned under conservation.
Right.
We were talking about add airports, but if you do the C one, then under the add airports, the land management activities would automatically be.
Right, because all of our land management properties are zoned conservation. So if you added the conservation land as exempt, then it handles the bullet 5 also.
Portions of it.
yeah.
I do remember that this was a long, long discussion, and it seems like we were trying to approach this by one of our more balanced efforts. And to Bill's point about this not necessarily being hard for the municipalities to say yes to, since it's, and I think there was some discussion too about coming in line with not just airport regulations. Was there not something too about roads anyway that was?
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about roads, and that's the last
I mean,
bullet.
What I mean is this is
Partly-
either a moot point or it's not. And if it's moot, let's not spend more time on it. But if it's actionable, let's do. That's kind of.
I wouldn't imagine that you would open up chapter 50 for one change. Like there will be lots of things that you will look at in chapter 50 and that are going to draw eyes versus this. So yeah, I mean, if you opened up chapter 50 for this one thing, it probably would go, but there would be several things you would look at and you'd want to change. So, not trying to look at it in a silo. I'm trying to look at it as,
So shall we keep a record of possible chapter 50 actions until we, okay, great.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, we are.
That works.
I just wanted to note it so everybody knew what we were discussing.
Suzanne. And then Wendy, do you still have another? Okay, Suzanne.
This is only for unincorporated Volusia, correct?
Well, so the words on this slide are about chapter 72, which is unincorporated Volusia. But what we've tried to do is highlight anything that, so you can't add exemptions in your implementing ordinance because that would be inconsistent with the minimum standard. If that exemption does not exist in the minimum standard, you can't add it in your implementing ordinance, right? So for instance, a city can't say, and we're going to exempt everything because it's inconsistent with chapter 50. So we're just trying to point out that as we add exemptions, or if you vote to add exemptions, that requires a change in 50 as well. They have to be consistent.
Yeah, so each municipality has their own tree ordinance.
Most, yes.
So I'm a little shocked by the current residential owner occupied property homestead, including for historic trees under exemptions.
That's in our code. That's our code says that you're exempt. Some of the cities have a different standard for that. The minimum standard says that's exempt. So so we can all say that's exempt, but you can have something that's more strict, and some cities do. The county code is not more strict in that regard. The
I
county code
understand.
they're exempt.
So the city of Ormond Beach, from what I'm seeing, I haven't looked at it like recently, if they've redone it, but they had a more strict than this.
Yeah, in some ways it is, but they require 10% replacement. We require 15% replacement. So in
Right.
some, as far as chapter 17 goes. So some things are more strict, some things are less. They do require permits.
So just to recap, chapter 50 that all the municipalities sign on to, if they're going to do their own enforcement, then the chapter 50 is the floor. They can go higher if they're going to enforce it. And there's only one municipality, is that Oak Hill, did you say, or Edgewater, that asks county to be the enforcement arm?
All the municipalities and towns have their own tree ordinance.
Okay.
And refresh my memory, I'm sorry, as to how many municipalities there are.
There's 16.
So 16 different ordinances.
Yes.
Um, the new right-of-way alignments section, there was a motion, but it got withdrawn. You did move unanimously to approve adding the land management activities as an exemption. But the other parts, the airport protection road projects, there weren't votes on that. That you did vote. You voted on state and federal land exemptions, but the motion failed. So, oh wait, here. There was a strike to eliminate that. Motion passed 10-1. So the adding an exemption for federal land failed. So it would just stay with the way that it is now in the code. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Right.
So one more thing on this page, the remove unclear language for planned, I forget what our OWs are.
Right of
Thank you.
ways.
Oh, we just said that. Okay. The
Yeah. So basically, right now, the unclear language in the plan right of ways is the code states that in planned public and private rights of way, historic and specimen trees are the only trees that require replacement. So you have all the other trees in planned public and private rights of way that don't have any protection or don't require any replacement. In opened or already planned right of ways, because we have some right of ways that are unopened, but they are technically planned. The only trees that require any replacement or approval for removal are historic trees. So you could have unopened right of ways that have been unopened for decades and decades that have, tons of trees in them, and they do not require any permit or protection.
Bill,
I have a question. So what the situation there is like Orange City area or Daytona Park Estates or something where the right of ways haven't been open to get to the lots that are already sold. And somebody needs to build a house and therefore somebody forces them to open that right of way, right, to get to the house. Does that happen?
Well,
And therefore they need to pay for the tree removal and replacement of the trees in that right of way so they can get to that house. Is that what we're talking
I
about?
don't have
that
to now.
you could see it that way. Yes, you could make that determination. But I think for us, the biggest thing is the planned public and private rights of way. So you're coming in for a new development, you're clearing all this right of way, and the only trees you have to protect or replant or repay into the fund are the specimen historic trees.
Like with the PUD or something? So
Yep.
you're coming
New-
in?
New development, yeah.
So,
Oh,
so like when a site, well, so two issues, currently, existing public or private rights of way are exempt. It doesn't say existing open public rights of way, right? So there was a question about should it say open rights of way? So that's one issue, existing. The second one is a planned right of way. So that would be a greenfield lot and someone's coming in to put in a subdivision and they're creating public right of way as part of that subdivision. Right now, except for specimen and historic trees, all the trees in that what will be a new public right of way are exempt. So you're building your subdivision, you're putting in a whole new spine, street, whatever. If it's open, it's going to be a public right of way. There's no tree replacement required for those. So in that subdivision, lots of trees are coming out, they're not being replaced. So that was really the question is, should we remove the exemption for planned public right of way to require it to conform with the tree removal and replacement requirement?
So respectfully, that's not exactly what's written there if we go back to it, because it's saying remove unclear language, but we're also talking about adding or taking away an exemption, adding a stricter, right? So one thing is the clarity on the already open rights of way that you mentioned. And then the other question, which is a bigger determination, is right now I'm going to put in a road and I can take out every single tree except specimen or historic, and I don't have to put any of them back. Do we want those trees to have to be put back in some measure? Right? So
Yes,
two
yes.
things on that item, actually. Jessica.
A historic statement, I guess, and a question. I thought that we landed somewhere pretty clear. We might not have voted, but I thought we landed on an exemption of public right of way as a group because we had Tad come in, we talked to engineering, and so
That was more about the road projects portion. because this was separate. The exemption for public projects in public right of way is would fall in the add airport section.
Right, so then I'm wondering, he did like that topic, we talked about it a long time, so I'm wondering, what's the difference then? If there's a public road project that we are exempting, what do we need to say about language for planned? I think, in my mind, the planned right-of-way should deal with private right-of-way and not public, because we're exempting public road projects.
So, I get you, but most of the time when someone's building a new subdivision, it's a public right of way. They're creating new public right of way out of nothing. Almost all, very few, only gated communities are creating streets that aren't open to the public.
Mhm.
And so, so there was a distinction. There was road projects that require the removal of trees. So like an existing road and they have to remove trees for something, a widening, a realignment, something like that. Excuse me, versus a new subdivision goes in and I'm creating new right of way. Should the developer be responsible for replacing those trees?
Okay, so then, I guess, is there a way that we can, because I don't want there to be a question on whether the county extending an arterial or thoroughfare, I think those are planned to be exempt in our minds. The discussion on subdivision roads that are then dedicated to the public, I understand, which brings me to my next question, which is, when you do tree preservation, and it's been a while since we did this, so I apologize, it's a set aside, right? So you have a percentage of trees that you save. And so is it that when the plans come in, when they calculate their existing condition, they just exclude those areas?
Different.
Okay.
So remember in the tree ordinance, there are sort of the few main tenets. One is you have to preserve 15% of the site. That's the whole site.
Mhm.
So you're not taking out the roads or whatever, the whole site. Then there's what has to be replaced. And that is where the planned rights of way, there's no replacement required except for specimen and historics. So you're still getting the whole 15%. It's the replacement calculation that would change if we changed that exemption, the exemption that says you don't have to replace trees for planned rights of way.
So then can you take us through, and maybe not today if it's not easy, a typical, you get your tree survey, it's 100 acres and you have thousands and thousands of trees. How do you calculate the preservation? The replacement.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, so you can,
Okay.
and this isn't usually what happens, but you can have an actual tree survey of the whole thing. Where every single tree is located, and then there's a table, right? You you go through as the developer and you identify which trees have to come out based on your plan, and you provide us a list of all of the trees that are coming out. You do the math. If the site is relatively homogeneous in terms of the tree cover, you can do what we call a statistical tree survey, where you can pick some plots that are representative, do a tree survey within those, and then you expand that to the whole site. You still have to identify every specimen tree and every historic tree by location.
Right. So if you're doing a statistical analysis, which is what I see the most, and that's what I was thinking of, if you're doing that, then when you calculate your replacement, do you do that square, like 100 by 100? You do the math over everything and then you subtract out your right of way area?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to ask this question. I think we discussed it, and it's tangential to the right-of-way discussion, but relevant. So a portion of each development must be set aside for protection of trees. That's one requirement. And how many trees? We just talked about that. But we also require that each individual lot have a minimum number of trees, correct? So the tree protection area is one thing and one calculation, and the lot is another and another calculation.
There's two ways you can develop a subdivision. You can clear the whole subdivision and go under one tree removal permit, or you can clear the infrastructure and the roadways and basically your retention areas, and you can leave all the lots wooded, and then you can come in individually with individual tree permits and clear the lots and provide replacement on the individual lots. You keep the trees on the lot that you want to keep. That's not as popular today. Typically, they want to, wipe everything, fill everything, bring in the roads.
So where I'm taking us somewhere else, but I do want to bring it up again. To me, there's sort of an inherent tension between having a tree preservation area and the lot requirement. And where I'm going with that, I know that not everybody believes that clustering density is a way to go, but we've talked about it a lot within the context of LID, for instance, so that you have more of the houses in an area and are able to leave more of the wild area wild. And I believe we started to discuss, but didn't really conclude or resolve the individual lot tree requirement as something that could be an impediment toward more tightly clustered homes. I'm just kind of speaking from my memory on
The
that.
smaller the lot, the fewer the trees. So
Right.
if you end up with a really small lot, I mean, you might have to, put 1 or 2 trees on the lot.
One compact Simpson stopper. Okay.
Well,
Placement calculations that apply to, if you clear it all as part of the subdivision, the developer has to provide those removal and replacement calculations even on the lots. If they leave the lots wooded and they come in individually to get a tree permit, only the trees that are in those zoning setbacks, remember, are protected. The where you're going to build your house, we assume you're going to have to remove those trees, and we don't require removal and replacement, except for historic trees, right? So keep that in mind.
Thank you. That's the critical point.
But at the very least, regardless of how you handle removal and replacement, whether you do it with the whole subdivision or you do it lot by lot, at the end of the day, every lot has to have 1 tree per 2,500 square feet of lot area. So if you have a small lot, then you just, like you said, you can have a compact one tree, depending on the size of the lot. So regardless of how you calculate all the removal and replacement, in the end, you have to have that minimum number of trees. If you save trees, that means you don't have to plant any, of course.
Right.
But if for whatever reason they have to be cleared and graded, when you go back to plant, you got to get at least to that 1 per 2,500.
Okay, thank you. So back to the original right of way. Bill, go ahead. I'll come back.
Okay, sorry, that was very clear. Thank you. But I'm going to go back to, so I think, are there actually 3 things? The tree preservation area, 15%. The lot requirement of how many every tree per 2,500 square feet, and then replacement tree calcs.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about, is the replacement tree calc. So you'll always still have your 15% on new subdivisions. You'll still have your 15% tree, you'll still have your minimum lot requirement, but we're talking about the replacement trees, and that's in the roads, and that's only protected because specimen and historics and protected are 6 inches to specimens. That's the thing we're missing here, right?
yes.
Okay.
What was your idea with the deck? Go through all of this and circle back for decision points? Is that what we'd like to do rather than? Because this seems to be a decision point. And we have 20 minutes.
Ready to make a vote on something, I say make the vote and let's, if you want to just say, hey, this is one we want to talk more about, let's put it there and we talk more about it at a future.
Please speak into the mic.
Oh, sorry, Bliss. I was saying we could do it either way. If you're at a point in any of this discussion where you want to make a vote because you're ready, you got it, it's in your brain and you want to make a vote, do it. If it's just something you want to tell us, hey, this is one we want to talk about again, tell us that, we'll bring that back with more information or whatever for more discussion. That's my recommendation.
Ms. Gal, thank you.
So we've clarified that we did vote already on the rebuttal presumption, which means that there are 3 that we have not voted on. So the first one is remove mobile home 4 and RA exemptions and add conservation from the exemptions, and to add conservation to the exemptions. I will make a motion to adopt that recommendation.
Any discussion of removing MH4 and RA exemptions from the zoning classifications, those zoning classifications, and adding C? Bill?
I don't understand what that means.
Thank you. Is anyone speaking? I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was speaking. I apologize. Okay. Right now in the code, it says in the agricultural use exemption section, if the property is classified A1, A2, A3 over 2.5 acres, A4, RC, MH3, MH4 over 2.5 acres, and a few others that, or they're classified as agricultural land by the property appraiser, they're exempt. The proposal here is to take a couple of those out. So MH4, right now it says if you're MH4 over 2.5 acres, you're exempt. The proposal is to say, if you're MH4, you're not exempt regardless of size. And RA, which is both of those are those sort of transition where the zoning categories talk about those uses are not commercial ag. Those are, you can have ag stuff, but for personal use.
However, if you do have commercial ag on those lots and you have the exemption, you're still exempt.
And RA is what again? Sorry.
Rural ag.
And you're going to add conservation to the exemption.
Yes.
And we're removing their exemption for trees?
Yes, they would need a tree removal permit unless they have an agricultural exemption.
And is that only historics or all trees?
That would be all trees.
Okay.
They would be just like any other zoning classification that's not in the list.
You do a tree survey, you calculate, you do your replacement.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen agricultural exemptions on other zonings that are not listed on here, and they're still exempt as well.
You're clear on the C. Okay. All right. There was a motion to adopt the recommendation that reads as remove MH4 and RA exemption zoning classifications, or remove the exemptions from those zoning classifications and add C. And was that seconded, I believe? That's what I thought. Jack seconded it. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No. Bliss.
Thank you. One opposed and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favor. Thank you. Carries. Keep going, Jessica.
That's okay. Next one. To clarify the language that in R3, I think is what we're talking about, or 4, wherever it is for lots 2.5 or larger, not over 2.5, whatever language you find appropriate for that.
Well, that's for all ag classifications. So that's what we're saying is we're going to basically remove the parentheses that says, over 2.5, but take that out. And then it would just be for all zoning classification, ag zoning classifications under the list. You've got to be 2.5 and over, right? And you're exempt that are in those categories, or you have your agricultural exemption and then you're still exempt.
So then the
Larger than 2.5.
Right now,
That's what it says now, and that's a problem because a lot of them are actually just 2.5 and then they're technically not exempt.
2.5.
Yeah, so right now it's 2.51. If you take out the over, that section of it, it goes to 2.5. So a ton of your A3 lots right now are at dead on 2.5, right? So this adds a bunch of A3 lots that aren't exempt. It adds exempt lots, but it also would go across all the zoning classifications that are listed. They would have to be 2.5 or larger, right? Or have
Bonafide.
bona fide ag. Yes,
Instead of 2.51.
right. So
Bill,
yeah, so you would have let's say you had an A1 lot that was 1 acre. Right now, you're exempt. If you approve it this way, you wouldn't be exempt unless you had a bona fide agricultural use with 1 acre.
I was gonna say, it's just expanding the exemption to go down to 2.5 or above, but it's also adding smaller lots, and you have to be 2.5.
Yeah, so it would read, right now, it reads, said property is classified as all of these things, and some of the classifications have the little parentheses over 2.5. It would read then, the said property is 2.5 acres or greater and is one of the zoning categories. Or has a bona fide ag use.
Jessica.
Are there any of the zoning classifications whose minimum lot size is under 2.5?
MH4,
We took it out,
right?
so no.
Mm-mm.
Any further discussion of the motion?
PRs. I don't think we made a motion.
I thought
We
you
just
did.
Oh,
I
Oh,
thought
wait,
you
Jessica,
did.
hold on, just to be clear. So A3 can be 1 acre. So they could be lower than 2.5. But if you had an ag exemption, then it doesn't matter what
It would
size
be
you are.
lower.
And then I'm not sure about the Osteen categories because OTR, ORE, and OCR, those are specific to the Osteen local plan. I'm not sure what their minimum lot sizes are off the top of my head.
Should we perhaps bring this back so it's just completely consistent before we vote on it?
That's completely up to you guys. But I would just say that like the A3 and the MH4, if they're already under 2.5 acres now, they're not exempt already. So that really doesn't change anything for the MH4 or 2 point, So if you've got an A2 lot that's 1 acre, should it be exempt? Is it truly agriculture? Well, if it is truly agricultural, it'll have an exemption and then it will be exempt. So, I don't get, too bogged down in it. I mean, you're going to add a bunch of A3 lots. You're going to take away some 1 acre, maybe A2 or something that's non-conforming already, right? That's just completely up to the board.
If it hasn't been done yet, I'll make a motion to proceed with these changes.
I'll second. I don't think we got to the motion second.
Okay. So it's been moved to add a 2.5 acre ag exemption requirement. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Hello? Okay, good. All those opposed? Motion. Bliss?
Bliss, did you vote?
Bliss?
No, I was stalling while I thought
Oh,
about it.
okay.
No,
Okay,
Okay, thank
so
you.
Bliss is opposed.
Yes,
Okay.
that was what I understood. Next, Jessica.
Okay, the last one is probably something that at least part of it will have to come back. My suggestion is to split out right of way being constructed as part of a development and public right of way projects somehow.
So we could try to figure out how to say that, like, so if the intent would be, if you're creating a new road as part of your new development, that wouldn't be exempt, but county roads, whatever, could be. So we can maybe figure out how to say that.
Yeah. you could just make the motion to tell us to do that, and this is going to come back to you guys once the ordinance is completed, and then you can see all the language before it goes. So I don't want to get back into the trap of line by line. Just tell us what you want, and if that's what's approved, that's what we'll put in there, and then we'll bring it back. But yeah.
John just said, which was, if it's private construction of something that will become a public right of way, it's not exempt.
I think I say well, because we have a project that's constructing Dunn Avenue. And so a private developer is constructing a county thoroughfare. And so we think we'd have to say that's not on the county thoroughfare road system or something like that. Right.
Private.
Yeah.
Bill?
Yes, let's split it out, bring it back to us, and then we can look at the strikeout and delete, right? And see how it reads. Okay.
Okay, and I guess, do we need to move that, Jessica?
So moved.
Any second? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? For the record, John Hoblik was looking at the ceiling. For Bliss, exactly. Thank you.
I'm not opposed.
Thank you, Bliss. We miss you.
That was a
I miss being there. It's much better in person.
Yes, it is. I think we did.
I think we should bog down more.
Yeah.
I move that we bog down on trees.
That's in the wetland discussion, where we're gonna bog.
Can't wait.
Right now, we're just getting treed.
Yeah, so we kind of just covered a lot of this. We were talking about the difference between 1 and 2 family residential and what applies in the development. Like I said, historic trees apply throughout the lot. Tree removal and replacement calculations apply, except for in the buildable area of the lot. They're the minimum requirements, which we've discussed. Specimen trees aren't required as part of your residential tree permit application, and the tree preservation areas aren't required on individual lots.
And the reason we have this here, just for reference, is that right now, the code is very unclear. If you're someone coming in to try to get a tree permit, you don't know which bits apply to you. Not all the same bits apply to every kind of development. So we say this here because we have a plan to rearrange things in a way that will say, if you are a single family lot, existing single family lot, here's what you need to pay attention to. And if you're something else, here are the things you need to pay attention to. So we're not necessarily proposing a change here, but just to say that there are different things that apply to different people. And it's really unclear right now if you're reading the code. So.
And just, it triggered something that I've seen in my neighborhood. House was built on a lot, was there for 50 years, and the house was raised because there was a plan to build a new house on it. Tree survey was done because I saw them, I actually saw the tree surveyors. Is that homesteaded property?
No.
It's a third category?
Well, that's a good question. New owner,
New owner.
not homesteaded.
Okay.
It says owner occupied, so you have to live there. If you knock down the house,
Right.
maybe if you've got like a RV and you're still living there, then that would still fit under that category. I mean, we try to look at everything with some common sense and see where you fit into those exemptions. But like Ginger says, we provided to you, I think this time and previously, like a reorg where we're moving things, moving all those permit applications. If you're a subdivision, if you're, so it's clear, exactly what's expected at your application of every step. So, we can make this smooth.
So what's actionable on this slide is, we're clarifying what does apply. We've already decided that historic trees are added to the applies side of this. And so the two questions that remain are to add specimen tree requirements or no? Just, it's just a
Yeah, yeah,
clarification.
this is just
Okay, thank
just
you.
informational.
When you're doing the reorg, under the single family, are we going to have language that either notes there may be state exemptions or copies in that state exemption in terms of the occupied single family primary residence with the arborist report, or do we just, I don't know if we have an education note in there.
Well, I mean, if you're in that process, you would already not be exempt. So like if you're, did I?
Okay, so, if you're owner occupied, right, you live in your house, you're still exempt except for historics, right? We just changed the historic thing, but you're still exempt for everything else. So, that state law doesn't matter because we already call you exempt. So the only difference would be, if it's now, once we make the change, if it's a historic tree on your lot and you want to take it down, you still have to come to us first. So we have chosen so far to not change any codes in response to that state law. Like it still applies, but we didn't think it required us to change our ordinance language.
Okay.
And I think we're still sticking with that.
Yeah, because if state law changed, you don't want to have it in there if it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, like I said, we still have exemptions in there for condition. So if they submit that to us, we look at it and we're like, yeah, you know, you don't need a permit. We still have those conditions in there. We're not planning on taking out any of the exemptions about the conditions of the trees, whether they're dead or deteriorated or dead to the point where death is imminent or pose a significant hazard. We're gonna leave all that in. So yeah, this is just informational. I think the next few slides are as well, how you protect trees, during development. Currently, it's 1 foot for every inch diameter of the tree. Go to the next one. It just kind of shows how we currently protect trees, and how we utilize some directional boring methods to not impact trees and to not require replacement for trees, and the typical tree detail that goes on plans, and the top portion of the picture is typically how people think about trees, that that's where the roots are and that's it. But most of the time, the root system far exceeds the drip line, 2 to 3 times the size of the crown. And the bottom portion that says 95% of the roots are in the top 3 feet, probably 80 to 90% of the roots are in the top 8 inches. So when people say, oh, we just want to do a little root raking, well, that little root raking took out 80, 90% of the roots.
Piece, but when you root prune a tree to transplant, you do the drip line, and that tree survives.
Well, not always, but a good portion of the time. If you know, if you know what you're doing and you do it properly, yeah.
Right. So is there an exception to that 95% root zone?
Yeah, so basically industry standards are you can impact up to 20 to 30% of the drip zone, which is already significantly, smaller than what the true root zone is.
This is an information only slide. Okay.
So yeah, so you can do root pruning techniques. You can mitigate some of, like I said, you can do directional boring. There are things. I mean, we follow ANSI standards, for pruning and industry standards. Yeah. So
I'm gonna
yeah.
Okay, we have 3 minutes. That's why.
So potential changes for the tree protection, languages for clarity, and remove the tree well language. Like tree wells are a huge problem. They typically don't improve, survivability of trees. It's kind of outdated. Industry standards have gotten away from tree wells, and it's just really not necessary in the code.
So this whole section of the code about protection during development, the only changes are sort of language changes for clarity, right? Like how we define the drip line, 1 foot per inch of tree diameter, right? We do that now, but it's not defined in the code. And then we have language right now that says tree wells shall be constructed around trees to be preserved when fill material will be deposited within the drip line. Nobody does that and it doesn't work. So we're just proposing to get rid of the tree well language. It's really the only anything substantive in that whole section. The rest of it is just really like being more clear.
So this is a decision point.
Yes.
I move that we remove the tree well language.
And do you also want to move that we make language changes for clarity?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? Bill?
So by removing the tree well language, what I think I just heard was that you have to put in a tree well when you're inside the drip line. Is that right? And filling inside the drip line, put in a tree well. I agree, tree wells are lousy. They do not work.
Yeah.
But so by removing that language, what that's going to make happen is if you get inside that drip line, you're gonna have to assume that tree is just impacted and you're gonna have to pay for its replacement. Is that?
No, not necessarily. There are things you can do. Like you said, if you're putting trenching utility lines in there, you can directional bore, you can do root cuts, you can do drenches to the root system, you can do aeration to the root system, there are ways to mitigate impacts to the root system. Well, this is what this would require basically, which we already do, is if you're going to be in that area, you may have to put together a root zone protection plan, right? And then, provide that. And if those trees do die in the course of the development, then you're going to be on the hook for them.
Any additional discussion or questions? Oh, Bliss? Oh, so we don't know who it is. It's aliens. However, we have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Bliss, are you voting? Bliss? Hello? Is she abstaining?
Not abstaining, sorry. I thought I was
Okay.
talking to you. I approve. I'm a yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
So that means we will start with tree removal and replacement next time, and definitely good place to start, and we'll be all fresh, and that's a big topic.
Mr. Hoblik.
The slide that you all put up there for section 1 under exemptions had more information on it than what was sent to our PDF for, there's more detail on that than what we got.
Okay.
Is it? Yeah. Because mine's not. Where'd we go here? Exemptions. I stopped there with trees.
Go to there it is.
You're on slide 9?
I'm on slide 9.
Trees, certain zoning classifications.
And then I got remove MH4 and RA.
Sure you're seeing it all?
Yeah.
I think you're not.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think you had it. Knocked off the bottom.
Yeah, I think he did.
I did that. Okay, hold on.
That's what I. Oh.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's zoomed in.
Yeah, you need to.
Just resend me.
You need a new computer, clearly it's not working properly.
I think it's you, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah, you're zoomed in.
You could check it should be posted on the webpage as well. So if you go on to the ENRAC webpage, hopefully it's there. Okay, hopefully everybody should have gotten the same thing, but weird things happen. So who knows?
Just my luck.
We were ending on a high note.
It is different.
Now.
Y'all hiding stuff from me is what you're doing. Okay, thanks. You don't need a motion for that.
I think everybody did a great job today. We got a lot done. We're redeeming ourselves from our initial run with tree preservation, and school's out. Thank you.
I
Adjourn.
think it's Donna's appearance here. Clearly, she changed the whole complexion.
didn't have one, they just took them